Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of Garage Studio Modelers. I'm Dave Forrest, this is my good friend
Harvey Lowe.
And in today's edition we're going to continue doing some work on Luftwaffe aircraft, in particular the Eduard 109K that I have here, which I've done some work on since the last time we were together.
Yeah.
Here the Focke-Wulf, this is the A7, so this is obviously a lot further along. And I've actually gotten to the decaling or decaling.
We're in Canada. Use proper English, David. Anyways, yeah.
What is proper English for that?
Is
Is
it
decal?
Is it
decal?
I call
decal?
it decals.
I call it decals.
Oh, God.
Anyway,
Well, that's because you're French
I'm
Canadian.
part French.
Yeah,
That's probably why. So
Looks great, though.
Yeah, it does look great. But okay, let's chat a little bit about Eduard decals.
Okay.
Because
we got something to talk about.
So my first experience with them. So just to back up a little bit. So these are the new decals that Eduard has come up with, where the carrier film is on top of the decal itself. So the benefit of that, ostensibly, is that you can, after it sets, you can peel it off, and it's like having a dry transfer. And they look, if you can manage it, it's great. The challenge. Or not a challenge, but I guess one of the features is that because of that, the decal film that you can peel off is a lot bigger than, and a lot, it's not as tight to the actual contours of the decal itself. They do, now I will say, they do set down, like once you get them down, and there's a bit of a trick that I learned the hard way. Once they get down, they do conform really well just using microset and microsol. So they do actually get right in, and you can see, it might be hard for you to see on camera, but I know I use some of the crosses here from the kit, the black and white crosses. I have to actually replace the top ones, but we'll talk about that in a second. And they actually get down really good and snug into the like. There's a lot of rivet detail on Eduard kits, as you probably know, and it really does a good job of getting into those crevices. Now, sometimes you have to. What I like to do is to go over it when it's still a little bit soft. Just kind of roll over it with a dampened Q-tip, just to apply that extra pressure. And I have to do that in particular over. There's a hinge. There's a panel with some hinges on this side of the plane, and to get that to conform properly was a bit of a fight. But it snuggled down really, really nicely. However. And you were witness to this, right?
I was watching.
So the very first decal I put on was this squadron marking here, and that went on without too much issue. Yeah. The second one I put on was this 20, the 20, and it's it's all one decal, and I just found I got it on the model okay, but when I wanted to reposition it, it was stuck. So I had to try and lift it off, but the carrier film is very thin and it's kind of fragile, so you have to be very careful. But I managed to get it on and move it without too much issue. There was a bit of a damage to the two, where a piece of the white, a little chunk of the white came out.
And that came off when you were moving it.
That came off when I was moving it. Yeah. Okay, and then, but there was later disaster to come. But again, we'll talk about that in a minute. And then when I went to do these, the upper wing crosses here, Balkenkreuzes, the decal completely crumpled, and I just couldn't get it apart, and so I ended up throwing out the Eduard decals for the tops of the wings, and I went to some aftermarket, some cutting edge, and the cutting edge ones I have were amazing. Like those, if you have any cutting edge decals, those things are fantastic. Very thin, sink down. No issue. Again, just with microset and microsols, you don't have to use it.
So that's what
you don't
you
use
use
anything harder.
After. That's what you use.
That's what I use after. So after I kind of stepped away and calmed down a bit, I said, well, let's give these decals a try. Let's go back to the Eduard decals. And I found, and my problem was I could get it on, but then once it was on, it was stuck. And I realized, well, maybe if I flood the area more, and because it's a gloss coat, there's surface tension, like the water will tend to beat up a bit. So what I did is I added a bit of dish soap just to break that surface tension. So I got a big pool of water in the area, slid the decal onto it, and you can move it around. But again, you don't have a lot of working time, so you have to be kind of quick, and you have to get it in and to line it up. But it worked. So it worked great for the fuselage crosses. It worked great for the underwing crosses.
Oh, those are.
Those are. Yeah.
You did those after
I did those after. Yeah.
Build.
But you can. I'm just looking at the light here, but you can still see because of the carrier film, like it's still.
I can see it
up,
even in this light.
Yeah, up in some areas.
Yes,
so I haven't. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to try peeling these.
Okay.
And see what happens. So the first one I tried to peel was again the squadron marking. And now you got to let them sit for at least 24 hours, and I think I let these sit for maybe 48. Right, so twice that. So peeling this off, I took off a few bits with this one here. So I had to touch it up, like just on the outside, just on the black outline. So I had to touch up the black outline with paint, and then when I got to the 20, actually I did this side first. So this 20 didn't fight me at all. It was fine. I got it on. I pleated it. I got it into place. Yeah. I was able to peel everything off with no issue. And all I did was I just found a like a panel line with the carrier film. I got a little knife underneath it. I clipped, and then once you get the tweezers in there, you can pull it off. It comes off fairly easily.
Really?
Yeah, it does.
I just have a awkward moment using a sharp blade and going in there.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that. Whether that's really the risk reward on that is worth it or not. And then the other thing you can do as well is, if you like, to your point, if you're not comfortable with the blade, you can flood this with odorless thinner, let it sit for a bit, and then just with a Q-tip, rub off like like it melts the film, but it doesn't hurt the underlying. Now the underlying transfer is tough. These things are like once they're on. Yeah. So if you can. If it doesn't pull off or you don't have any issues getting it on, and again, I think it's really important while you're putting the decal on to really use that wet cotton bud to really get it down to make sure the adhesives on the back of it really do their job and stick. But if you can do that, they stick amazingly well. And I'll tell you, I was working on, going back to the K here, the 109K, pardon me. So I had a decal for the spiral, a white decal that came in the kit. So I put it on, but because there's so much carrier film, like you can't use them. You can't, because you're trying to get it on, and the carrier film's crinkling up, and it's a disaster. Yes. So after it's set, I decided, okay, I'll just strip it down. So I used that paint. I used some paint stripper that I have.
Okay.
And it took everything off except the decal.
Oh wow!
Like I had to sand the decal off, so that's how strong the transfers are.
So that one originally was also one of those Eduard lift.
Yeah, and it was a disaster. Oh. So I just said no. So I just ordered some spiral masks from Eduard, and I used that. So I masked this. I painted it white, masked it, and then painted the green over it.
With all due respect to Eduard, if it ain't broke.
Well, yeah. So I was.
But I had a suspicion because we do this garage studio, but we also come over and hang out and do the build nights, and I was there when that happened, and you were working away, and I knew right away because, by the way, he's supposed to get me a drink, and he's sitting there for like a half an hour not saying anything. That means, oops, something's wrong.
I was preoccupied.
Yeah, and I saw it. That decal, literally, when it hit the water, it kind of went. It kind of crumpled or something.
Yeah, because I was trying to maneuver it, and it just and I caught it, and
I saw it.
So it seems to me that if you have a decal that only has one color on it, or has a lot of carrier film like these guys would, because it's just really the four corners here of the cross, and then everything else is carrier film. Yeah. That is very delicate to work with.
Yes, right.
These guys, it's all transfer.
So it's easy. Yes.
So there seems to be more structural integrity to the decal decal. I'm going to say decal from now on. Yeah. There's more structural integrity.
Say decal.
There's more. Well.
Okay.
You say decal. I say decal.
I'm from Ontario. He's from Quebec. All right.
So but now I haven't done these guys, and I don't know if I will. But the problem is because there's so much carrier film, more than you would see on normal decals, decals. Yes. Right. Like, what do I do? So do I flood this with thinner and just let it ball up and take it off? Do I try and pick it off and risk ripping? It seems to me that putting the thinner on and melting it, I think reduces the chances of pulling anything.
The only thing though, if you do, you're adding a chemical on top. Do you know what I mean? Even if it's odorless. Okay, that's fine. So
I haven't had any issues with like for example. Like I'm starting to put the stencils on. Yeah. And
no problems with the stencils.
Well, not yet.
Not yet.
But I'm not going to pick off. I'm not going to use I'm not going to pick off or peel it off. I'm just going to melt it.
Right. Did you say that you lifted the film off that one yet? Or
no, nothing.
So, Dave just got me these decals. If you were using these big, you can't see them, see the sheet, protective sheet. But if you were using, let's say Edward did these, would you attempt to do these? Are you saying that these larger are okay with this?
I think you have a much better chance of success. Now you have to. So you can. There's two ways I think you can look at this. One is there's two ways of, or I guess one. The first way is that it's positive. You got to applaud Eduard for coming up with something different.
Yes, sure.
The end product is, it's like they're painted on. Like when you peel them off, it looks like they're painted on, right? They conform really nice. But and there's people that say, hey, if you get them on, you can just leave them on. Like just treat them like a normal decal.
Okay.
But I just find that there's just more carrier film on them than normal decals would have. So you're fighting that. But if you have a nice gloss, they are pretty thin.
Okay.
I haven't glossed over these yet, so I don't know what they look like. With the film on, with a nice coat of gloss on them. I think, but I
it scares me. I
would stay. Yeah? I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to stay away from these types of decals that just don't have a lot of transfer underneath them.
Yep.
And I'll use regular decals.
And then those dark.
And then these other ones I think I can use. But you're always a little bit wary. Now the swastikas, because of the European Union regulations, they come in two pieces.
Okay.
And with the carry, so if you use the Eduard ones, you got to put one on, take off the carrier film, and then put the other one, take off, and so it just no way. So I have a bunch of aftermarket.
Well, by the way, YouTube, we're talking swastikas, but these are family models for family and hobbies. Just saying that, so please don't cut this episode off because we showed it.
Well, they might block it in Europe, but
okay,
we'll see.
Now I've been on a couple of great Zoom calls, and a shout out to IPMS. Nenny, that's Northeast New York. Hi, guys. And one of the discussions in one of our last meeting was how many people use these new Eduard decals, and on that call, none of them do. And you've got some preeminent modelers there. And I don't know if it's true. I haven't used them. I don't know after seeing that whether I would go. I support Eduard. I buy their stuff. But none of them use it, and they're a little bit hesitant. Because of what you went through, would you use? I mean, you said that you use them.
I'd use them again.
Use them again okay.
Under the right circumstances. I would use them again. Okay. But for these types of things, they're just not. They fight you too much.
Well, that thing just dissolved when it hit the water, and then
it's crumpled. I was trying to manipulate.
I saw you
crumpled. There's no way. And at that point, you just forget it.
Yeah.
And then on the 20 on this side. And I have pictures, so I'll send you the pictures and you can just throw them in, the kind of before and after. I had to touch this up. I ripped off the bottom, part of the 2 and the bottom part of the 0 here, like the white and the black outline. So I was like, well, now what? Like, wait, no, I just...
Now, you've touched it up with Gen 3, and it does look great, but we were just talking off camera. If you're a serious competitor to shows like the U.S. Nationals...
Oh, you're done.
You're done.
You're done.
And unfortunately, that's the name of the game. Maybe it's too much but it's difficult when you're at that level and there's a tiny little thing. If it doesn't bother you and you don't want to compete, fine. But
that's the okay. So I talked about the first point. Hey, you got to applaud Eduard for doing something different, for pioneering. Sure. Great.
New kits. Yeah.
But if it ain't broke.
Yeah.
Why fix it?
I'm sorry, I don't know why
and it's kind of risky.
Yeah.
And there's a process you have to go through, and I see videos of people online. Like I looked at a lot of other YouTubers with how they do it, and they seem to work with it. And
you know what?
Maybe it's user error. No. Entirely possible.
Possible.
Right. It's entirely.
You know what the solution is, Dave? Just build Japanese and do a round mask with a Hinamaru. Then who cares about this stuff, right? There you go.
Yeah. Maybe a Zero is my future.
Zero is your next project. But I don't know if I would. Honestly, and I'm sorry to Eduard, I don't know if I would. I certainly love the kits, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw you put these on afterwards. It's like no problem.
Yeah, it was like a dream.
Like I look at it now. It's pretty good.
Yeah. Like these are.
I don't know.
So
and because if you do use odorless thinner to take off the carrier film, you got to be careful. What is the underneath?
So here's the thing. Yeah. So let's go back to the gloss part. So when I painted this, and I do this I started doing this for all my aircraft builds. So once I put the color on, I give it a light sanding with a polishing stick, just to get some of the grit off, just to make sure it's as smooth, as a silky finish as possible. And then when I put the gloss coat on, in this particular case, I used Tamiya X22, which is their the acrylic
Clear.
gloss.
I think they call it clear.
Yeah, it's clear gloss.
They call it clear. Yeah.
In their acrylic range, and I cut that with it's about 50% that, 50%, no more than 50% leveling thinner, the lacquer leveling thinner, and you need the leveling thinner because if you don't, you run a chance of it kind of pebbling up or drying too quickly. You want to get it on the model, and you want it to kind of have a chance to level out. The other thing that you need to do, which is very unsettling for me. But Jerry Brennan, he's
one of our buds.
One of our guys, like a fantastic, great aircraft modeler.
Yeah, aircraft modeler.
Does very well at the Nats almost every time he's there. He suggested, hey, just put wet coats on. So I got a 0.5 Revolution. I spray that on there, and I go close. I spray close, and I do wet.
Fairly low PSI ish.
Yeah, I usually
10.
I like 12ish.
Okay.
10 to 12ish. Call it. Right.
It looks great, but I'm amazed at how beautiful that gloss is.
Yeah, I was because sometimes when I do the gloss, it's like a semi-gloss.
Yeah,
heavily.
Yeah. We should talk about gloss coats one episode.
Yeah, maybe we'll do one on camera. Maybe when I get around to doing this.
I'm looking at this. It's hard to see, but it's really nice.
Yeah, it's nice, and it doesn't because you're. With the leveling thinner and the amount you're putting on, like it looks like when it goes on wet, it looks like, oh my god, this thing looks horrible, but it shrinks down. It comes a very thin coat. You don't lose any of the underlying detail, and I want to do it because I want to get I'm going to put some like washes or oil paints in here to pull out the panel line and really detail.
Right,
and also. Right, and you put the decals on, and then I'll seal it with another coat on the decals just to make sure everything's protected, and then, but let it sit for. I did it wet, and I actually even after 24 hours after I was handling it, and I found that I was getting fingerprints.
Right.
So I buffed it, but I think let it set. Next time I would do it. I would let it sit for like 3 days. Just fully cure.
Back to the odorless to remove those decals though. This is where it's important. You used an acrylic gloss, more or less with a leveling thinner, as your base to protect, right?
Well, yeah.
So, but if you used, let's say, an enamel or something, I found that you've got to put that protective layer on it. Otherwise, that odorless thinner could affect it. And by the way, folks, I tested it. Don't take the X22 Clear and mix it with regular lacquer thinner. It won't work. It has to be the Mr. Leveling Thinner or the Tamiya lacquer because those are what I term synthetic.
It's got to have that leveling agent.
Yeah, right. And it's not; those are not pure lacquers like you would buy at a hobby store. So don't use the hobby like the hardware store lacquer thinner.
No.
Yes.
Yeah, you got to use
the hobby.
You got to spend the money and
get the money, Mr. Leveling Thinner or the Tamiya.
And let it set. But to your point about protecting it. I think if you use like fully acrylic or a lacquer, you're fine. If you're doing enamel.
Gauzy's another one you could use because that's water based. Gauzy. Yeah.
Yeah. But the secret is to put it on wet and then let it dry. And it's just there's still.
Well, good for you because I don't know whether I'd use those types of decals.
Yeah. So anyway, that's our.
There you go.
20-minute rant
on decaling
on Eduard decals decals.
Yeah.
Decals. Today's so kind of.
We were spending 20 minutes on. But that's good, right? People want to know.
Yeah, no, it's a learning experience, right? Now, what I want to have to go through that touching up that no way because I was very, like I almost thought about, do I just put this aside or do I order another kit, get another cop because I don't have another 20 or a 0. So I was even contemplating, just order another kit and then I have 2 A7s and I'll just build another version if I ever do it or sell it or whatever just to get the decal. But
the other problem with that is if you're at your friend's house building models and he has problems with decals and he owes you a coffee, it's kind of like it's not a good experience. So, there's some after effects of this decaling that it still impact me. I'm just saying, David. Nonetheless. Anyways.
Yeah, you got your drink.
So all seriousness, what out of 10, what would you say? Rating out of 10 these decals?
Oof, that's a good question. I think I think giving it a simple rating is kind of hard, but I think if you can get it to work, I think they're an 8 or a 9. but the effort is like a 2.
Yeah, I hope Edward's not why he's getting upset, because they do great stuff.
Yeah, they do, and again, maybe it's me.
It could be you.
Could be me. Could be operator error.
Yeah.
And you know the other decals didn't fight me as much.
Yeah, that's true. I saw you put the other ones on.
They were like these went on. You know these went on really easy, and look, like you can't see, but just like everything's sunk right in. So even if I don't take off the carrier film, I'm probably okay.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, as I see it here, folks, this believe you painted. So I never use decals for these bands, right?
Yes.
Just saying.
Yeah.
I don't.
I don't either.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I just paint them on.
Yeah.
I just use some flexible masking tape, like the vinyl tape, and.
Because if you did have that decal,
Now
for
this
that,
was let's talk about this. This was a pain, because so not only is it 3 bands, but it's 2 thinner white bands, really thin white bands on the outside. So it took me a while. I had to go back and touch it up, and just because some of the bands weren't, they would get wider and whatnot. But the end product, you couldn't get that. Well, there isn't even an option for a decal, so you have to paint.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Some kits they provide them, but I never. Yeah, to your point.
Yeah, I've never done a quarter scale Luftwaffe fighter. Maybe it's time.
Yeah, I mean,
because you got a lot of colorful bands. Yeah.
I mean, when I started into modeling, it was aircraft before armor.
Yeah.
So it's always been a passion. But not to say I'll do armor. I still love doing armor, but I don't know.
They're cool, and with the Masters of the Air, right? I mean,
yeah, that's true. That helps.
No, I'm kind of like, gee, I got to get a Luftwaffe.
But the Eduard, talk about the Eduard kids. Let's give them credit where credit is due. They go together beautifully. The detail is outstanding. Like very little filler. They're getting smarter about panel lines.
This is unscripted. Look what David got me for Edward. So they do nice stuff.
Yeah, they're 3D printed aftermarket stuff.
For those A6 M30.
Yeah, the aftermarket stuff is gorgeous.
So they do good stuff. So we're not here just to harp
just the
on
decals are just a little. They fight you a little bit more, right? You can get a very nice finish out of them, but I just kind of struggle. So I just be very careful of the ones that don't have a lot of transfer on them. A lot of carrier film.
You haven't done the stencils yet, correct?
I started the stencils.
Oh, and they're okay?
Yeah, but again, you're flooding it, and just like now I know, and maybe this was a bit of I look at this as this is the first one, so I'm kind of relearning aircraft and some of the newer techniques and whatnot. So there's going to be some bumps along the road,
sure, and
I don't expect that this is going to do amazingly well at a show.
Well, that's beautiful. No,
but that's the thing. Like you learn, right? And if you don't, like the nice thing about having an issue is that it forces you to overcome it. And overcoming it makes you a better model.
And maybe everybody has a preference. So, like, you're right? I mean, we were talking yesterday about, you saw me working on my it's a Key 57 Topsy where I cut up the ICM.
The only guy I know would take a beautiful kit and just chop it to bits.
It's on my Facebook. You want to start looking at it. But we talked about what you noticed I was using putty, and you use a different method. But I tried. Sorry, you use CA glue to fill gaps. I know we're off topic.
Yeah.
I found it problematic. So everybody's different.
Yeah, it's whatever works for you.
Whatever works for maybe some guys love this, and we'd love to hear in the comments if somebody says, "Hey,
I've done this and it works for me," and we do read the comments. Or if you don't, and all I know is I have a big drawer and a bin full of aftermarket decals, and I will think, I'll probably go to those aftermarket decals, but Eduard provides a lot of great options, like beautiful options.
I just Kleenex stuck in my pocket on TV. I use a cutter. I use a vinyl cutter, as you know. I mask a lot of my decals, and I use Design Studio type software to do that. So I'm a bit different. But certainly for those crosses, I'd stick to decals. Yeah,
before it's funny, because I have some aftermarket masks as well, and I thought, well, Joe, just mask this and spray it. And I said, well, I have some. Let me try.
You had I was there. You had these on in like a couple of seconds.
Yeah, it was very simple.
Basic decaling 101.
Yeah. So maybe. So we'll do a little camo on this today. We'll come back, and then maybe when we. We'll gloss this and do some Eduard decals on this. Yeah, sure. Why not? Let's try to.
It's live.
Then I'll show you. I'll try and recreate what happened. And show you guys what I mean, and maybe somebody can point out something I'm doing wrong. I'd love to hear get some feedback on that. But so let's get the airbrush going. We'll throw some more color on this cave.
Back soon.
Put this guy aside.